The story of Australia doesn't start with tall ships. It begins much, much earlier. It begins with a journey across the sea, a journey made by the bravest people. At least 65,000 years ago, the first ancestors set out from the islands of Southeast Asia. The world was different then. Ice held much of the planet's water, and the sea levels were lower. The landmass we now know as Australia was connected to New Guinea. This larger continent was called Sahul. It was a vast, unknown world waiting for the first human footprints. Those first steps marked the beginning of an epic story of survival and connection to country. Imagine leaving everything you know behind. These were not accidental voyages. They were planned. People built rafts or canoes from bamboo and reeds. They looked at the horizon and saw the faint outline of a new land, or perhaps they followed the flight of birds. They packed what they could: tools, knowledge, and courage. The crossing would have been perilous. Open water, unpredictable weather, and the vastness of the ocean stood between them and their destination. Yet, they made it. They arrived on the shores of Sahul, a place teeming with life that had never seen a human before. This was not just a migration, it was an act of incredible skill and determination. When they landed, they stepped into a world that was both beautiful and terrifying. Giant animals, the Megafauna, roamed the land. There were enormous kangaroos that stood taller than a person, and flightless birds of immense size. The forests were thick with unfamiliar plants, some edible, some poisonous. The rivers were wide and full of life. It was a land of abundance, but also a land of danger. Every day was a lesson. The First Peoples had to learn quickly. They had to understand the rhythms of this new country, its seasons, its secrets, and its spirits. Their survival depended entirely on their ability to listen to the land and learn from it. This arrival was the dawn of a new human chapter. It was the start of the longest continuous culture on Earth. The people who made that journey carried with them the seeds of a society that would flourish for tens of thousands of years. They were not just survivors, they were pioneers, scientists, and artists. They began to map the land not on paper, but in their minds and in their stories. They named the rocks, the rivers, and the stars. They learned to live with the country, not just on it. This deep spiritual connection to the land began the moment their feet first touched the soil of Sahul. Once on the shores of Sahul, the people began to move. They did not wander aimlessly. Their journeys were purposeful. They followed the seasons, the flow of water, and the movement of animals. Over thousands of years, these small family groups spread across the entire continent. They walked from the tropical north, through the arid heart of the land, and all the way to the cold southern coasts, even reaching what is now Tasmania. Each step was taken with knowledge. They learned to read the landscape like a book. A bent tree, a certain type of rock, or a change in the soil all told a story. It told them where to find water, where to find shelter, and where to find food. The night sky was their map. Long before any other civilization, the First Peoples were expert astronomers. They looked at the stars not just with wonder, but with practical purpose. The patterns in the sky, like the emu in the sky within the dark clouds of the Milky Way, signaled the changing of seasons. When the emu appeared in a certain position, they knew it was time to collect eggs, or that a particular plant was ready to be harvested. This knowledge was passed down through generations in stories and songs. The stars guided them on long journeys across vast, featureless plains, ensuring they could always find their way back home or to important ceremonial sites. Adapting to the environment was the key to their success. Sahul was a land of extremes. The climate changed dramatically over millennia. There were ice ages that made the south bitterly cold and dry periods that turned the inland into a harsh desert. The people adapted. They developed new technologies and new strategies. In colder times, they learned to make warm cloaks from possum or kangaroo skins, stitched together with fine bone needles. In dry times, they knew how to find water hidden deep underground, sometimes by following certain animals or by recognizing specific plants that tapped into subterranean sources. Their resilience was extraordinary. Family and community were the heart of their survival. People lived in small, mobile groups, but these groups were connected through a wide network of kinship. They had complex social laws that determined relationships and responsibilities. These bonds ensured that knowledge was shared and that everyone was cared for. If one group was struggling, others would help. They gathered for ceremonies, to trade goods, and to share stories. This strong social fabric was their greatest strength. It allowed them to not only survive the challenges of the land, but to thrive in it, creating a society that was both robust and deeply connected. Finding food in this new land required immense skill and knowledge. The First Peoples were expert hunters and gatherers. They understood the life cycles of hundreds of plants and animals. The men typically hunted larger game. They pursued kangaroos, emus, and even the giant Megafauna in the early days. This was dangerous work that required stealth, courage, and teamwork. They would track animals for days, using their deep understanding of animal behavior to predict their movements. They used spears, boomerangs, and woomeras, or spear throwers, which allowed them to hurl their spears with incredible force and accuracy over long distances. The women were the primary gatherers and were the foundation of the community's diet. They had an encyclopedic knowledge of the plants in their environment. They knew which roots were edible, which berries were sweet, and which leaves had medicinal properties. They also knew how to process plants that were otherwise toxic. For example, they would grind cycad nuts into flour, then leach the toxins out with water in a long and careful process, making them safe to eat. They gathered yams, fruits, seeds, and insects, providing a reliable and diverse source of nutrition that sustained the community through all seasons. Their work was precise, scientific, and essential. Tools were an extension of their hands and minds. The First Peoples were brilliant innovators, creating a wide array of tools from the materials around them. They shaped stone into sharp axes for cutting wood and sharp flakes for knives. They used bone to create fine needles for sewing and fishhooks for catching fish. Wood was carved into bowls, shields, and boomerangs. Each tool was perfectly designed for its purpose. They developed grinding stones to process hard seeds into flour, long before agriculture was established in other parts of the world. This technology shows a deep understanding of physics, engineering, and material science. This was more than just survival. It was a system of land management. Evidence shows that the First Peoples were not just passive gatherers. They actively managed the landscape to ensure its productivity. They used controlled fires, what is now called cultural burning, to clear out undergrowth. This practice encouraged the growth of specific grasses that attracted kangaroos and made it easier to hunt. It also prevented larger, more destructive wildfires. They planted yams and harvested them in a way that ensured the plants would regrow. They were the continent's first farmers and environmental custodians, shaping the land that shaped them. The lives of the First Peoples were woven with art, story, and ceremony. Their culture was not separate from their daily existence. It was the very lens through which they saw the world. Every part of the landscape had a story, a meaning, a spiritual significance. This was the dreaming. The dreaming tells of the great spirit ancestors who journeyed across the land in the time of creation, forming the mountains, rivers, and deserts. These stories are a map, a history book, and a moral guide all in one. They were passed down from elder to child through song, dance, and intricate paintings on rock walls. Rock art galleries are among the oldest and most extensive in the world. They are a window into the minds of the ancestors. In places like Arnhem Land and the Burrup Peninsula, tens of thousands of images cover the rock shelters and overhangs. These paintings depict animals, human figures, and spiritual beings. They record ancient hunts, document ceremonies, and tell the stories of the dreaming. Some paintings show animals that have been extinct for thousands of years, like the thylacine on the mainland. This art was a way of connecting with the spiritual world, teaching the next generation, and marking a group's connection to their specific country. Family was everything. Kinship systems were complex and governed all social interactions. Everyone knew their relationship to everyone else and the responsibilities that came with that relationship. This system created a powerful social safety net. It ensured that children were raised by the entire community, that the elderly were respected for their wisdom, and that food and resources were shared equitably. These strong bonds were essential for protecting the family and ensuring the group's long-term survival. In a land that could be unforgiving, community was the ultimate shelter. The legacy of these first peoples is the land itself. For over 65,000 years, they lived and thrived on the continent of Sahul, which became Australia. They survived ice ages, rising seas, and immense environmental change. They did so not by conquering the land, but by understanding it and living as part of it. Their journey is a testament to human resilience, ingenuity, and the profound power of culture. Their knowledge, passed down through countless generations, represents the longest and most successful story of human adaptation on the planet. It is a story that is etched into the rocks, written in the stars, and lives on in the hearts of their descendants today.